This is the gag reels. What's that?
How do you get yours to fill up the whole thing?
Gag reel. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Good morning. We're live in my X5. It's not really mine. It's a loaner. But anyway, we're driving to another court hearing. Same case, actually, from our last podcast a few days ago. Different hearing, trial setting conference. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk nothing about the law, per se. So we've been kind of doing some test podcasts to just kind of get familiar with our voices and getting comfortable with our own voices, our own skin. And so we haven't really been making public our first podcast, but a few yous, special people, we've been sharing it and kind of getting feedback, constructive criticism, and a couple people have said, well, we want to know who you guys are to begin with. Who are these two fine gentlemen, attorneys, talking about the law and such, but what's the foundation for what you're even saying, right? We love that word. It's an amazing concept in the law in the courtroom. Anyway, so we're going to spend in today's podcast, we're going to talk about who we are. And I'm going to pass the mic over to my esteemed colleague, my law partner, Josh Genzik.
Well, let's start with you. Why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school, that sort of stuff.
So, my name is Steven Ibarra. I just turned 38 yesterday. Yay, happy birthday to me. So, I'm 38. I was born in La Mirada, California. I grew up in Norwalk, California, which is the city right next to it, which is part of Los Angeles County. A lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but most may have not heard of Norwalk. Anyway, so I grew up in Norwalk. I went to Catholic schools growing up. I went to St. Linus Elementary in Norwalk, California, and then I went to St. Paul High School in Santa Fe Springs. And then I went to UC Berkeley, and because I had taken so many AP classes at St. Paul, I had enough credits that transferred over, and I actually finished in 3.5 years at Berkeley. I don't know if you knew that about me, Josh.
I didn't.
But I finished in 3.5. During that time, well, in high school, actually, I started a band. I was the lead singer and lead guitar player for a punk band called Whole Nine Yards. And so when I went to college, I still was doing the band thing, the music thing, and it consumed me. I mean, I'm the kind of person that if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it 110%. And it was no different when I was in college. I was still very much into music and writing music and songs in my brain at all hours, and I'm writing music. And so I would come down to Southern California and play some shows. We actually played one show in San Francisco on right in the Haight-Ashbury district, this little bar. I don't even think I was 21 when we played that bar. But anyway, so I did that. What was the point to that? What was my point? Well, that's why I finished college in 3.5 years. I could do it because I had the credits, and B, I wanted to get back down to continue recording music and playing music and that kind of a thing. So in college, I had a decent GPA. I think it was a 3.2, but my LSAT wasn't very good. I guess we're being brutally honest here. And so I didn't get into any really, good law schools. I didn't. And one accepted me, University of West Los Angeles. I went there. I did really well there. I made a choice at that point to give up music because, again, I'm the kind of person that does something 110%. And, the first semester of law school is when I realized this is a lot of work. This is a lot of reading. I can't do both 110. I can't do music 50% and law school 50%. I had to make a choice. and I chose the law. I fought the law, and the law won. No, I won. So that's kind of what my little background.
And so, but why the law? What made you're this musician that wants to, was so committed that you finished undergrad early. This is what you want to do, and it seems like a pretty drastic change between, lead singer in a band and going to law school. Those are two different worlds.
Yeah, so my parents were both immigrants. My mom was born in Mexico, Sinaloa, and my dad was born in Costa Rica, Puerto Limón. And they both came over here when they were very young, and I think that they both didn't come from money. My mom especially. She has stories of just how really impoverished she was in this small town in Mexico. And so they both really pushed us really hard. I have an older sister. It's just the two of us, and they pushed us really, really hard to always do well in school. And my mom would always, during the summer, enroll us in summer school, and she would push us, and we would do extracurricular activities and sports, and but never music, actually. And that's why I discussed that, because they pushed us really hard to do well, and to either you got to be a lawyer, you got to be a doctor. That's really, in this country, how to become successful, how to become truly successful. And so when I got into music, it was a big fight. It was a big struggle. My mom did not support it. My dad kind of did. He actually did buy me my first guitar. We went down to Guitar Center on Sunset in Hollywood, and he bought me a Fender Stratocaster, and that was really cool. I'll never forget that day. But he didn't really support. He did and he didn't. I think he just wanted, whatever my mom said kind of goes, kind of a thing. But she was very much against it. I love you, Mom, but you know that you never supported that scene. I think she was always worried about, like, the lifestyle that Michael Jackson had. I mean, he was alive at that time, but kind of the struggles he had with being a star at such a young age, and so the horror stories. I think Kurt Cobain had just taken his life, Elvis Presley, all these rock stars who turned to drugs and alcohol. She was very, very afraid of that would be a life for me. And so your question is, why the law? And so, like I said, my parents pushed us really hard to go into those fields. I think it wasn't until about my sophomore year in high school when I realized that, hey, you know what? I think I do need to get into this. I mean, I had a teacher who was a lawyer. He was a high school teacher, but he had passed the bar, but he never practiced. And he told me, he said, you're going to be a lawyer one day. I just know it. And I'm like, well, why do you say that? He's like, because you like to argue. He wasn't saying it in a bad way, but he just knew. He was a lawyer, and I think he just knew how, analytical maybe my brain was. And he was my American history professor. And so I think it was around that time when I started to realize. But yeah, I got to a point very quickly, because that was my sophomore year and I started my band my junior year. I think I got to a point very quickly where I fell in love with music a lot. I was really in love with it. But I also knew, let me wrap this answer up quickly here, but I remember I went backpacking after college. I went on a 6-week backpacking trip. I met my cousin Jason for about 2 weeks, and then the rest of the 4 weeks I was on my own. But when I started in Italy, when I got to Spain, I started losing. I was out of money. I was running out of money. It was very expensive, and I didn't want to rely. I didn't want to rely on my parents, and so when I got to New York, I was going to stay in New York, in Manhattan, for a night. I was out of money completely, and by the grace of God, I literally thought I was going to have to sleep in Central Park. This is no lie. This is a real story. And I went to a hostel, used my credit card. I knew it was maxed out, but by the grace of God, it went through. The card went through, and I was able to spend the night at a hostel in Manhattan, right next to Central Park. And I got on a plane the next day, flew home, and when I touched down, I was like, I'm going to law school. This is it. I'm going to law school. I don't have any money. I wasn't making money with music. I did it more because I loved it. I wasn't making money. And that's when I decided I need to go to law school. So that's my story.
It's a pretty roundabout story, but...
Yeah.
So at what point did it kind of transform from your parents pushing you to do it to, this is something that I really want to do, this is something that I'm passionate about?
That's a good question. I definitely in law school, for some reason, I really had an affinity for criminal procedure. I was reading the cases and the Terry stop and search and frisk and
SELA search.
What is it?
A SELA search?
Yeah.
Search instant to a lawful arrest.
Right. And for some reason that really intrigued me. Not that I wanted to be a criminal defense lawyer, but just the Supreme Court cases that we were reading in law school, and I think it was like around that time when in torts I really grew to like torts. I had a really good professor, and I had, prior to that, I was right after college, I went to work for a solo attorney in Beverly Hills doing personal injury, and so I had some torts background, so to speak, right? Some personal injury background. And so when I took torts, it made sense for me. I was like, oh, I know this stuff. I understand it. I think it was around that time. I think it was just learning, picking up a few courses here and there and really like appreciating it and really liking it. I think that's when I started to realize I could do this. Like, this is definitely something that I see myself doing. It was never about the money back then. It was about helping people. I mean, it still is. So. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It does. Yeah. I don't know where you want to go from here.
Oh. All right. Well, why don't we turn the tables here? All the sun's in your face.
So I grew up in West Covina, born and raised. Went to Bishop Almont High School, which is a substantially better high school than where Steven went to high school.
Oh yeah, right.
I was an athlete growing up. Played sports my entire life. Played baseball in high school. Graduated from high school. Went to Whittier College. Played baseball at Whittier College. Played there for 4 years, and then graduated from Whittier. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was in a sales position for a little bit. Still didn't really know what I wanted to do. I come from a little bit different background than Steve. Both my parents come from immigrant families. They themselves are not immigrants. My dad's a guy from the Valley, but his grandparents are survivors of the Holocaust, and so we have immigrant background on that side. And then my mom's parents are from Mexico, so we can relate there. But I say that we come from different backgrounds because I was never told you have to be this or you have to be that or you should be this or you should be that. It was never about that. Success was always a relative term. My dad's a big John Wooden guy, so he has this perception of what success is, about just essentially fulfilling your full potential in whatever it is. And I think what was really preached to us as children was, if you enjoy what you do, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And both my parents are educators. My mom and dad both taught primary school and high school. My dad worked in LA Unified for a long time and then ended up working in the School of Education at SC for 20 plus years. My mom worked in Montebello. She taught in elementary school and then became essentially a vice principal and then worked at the district office for 15 plus years in the state and federal funding department. So how I didn't become an educator is beyond me, but that's what was preached to us, that it didn't matter what you did as long as you loved it. And they wanted us to do good, right? It's kind of like what Abe Lincoln says, is that, whatever you do good. And so I had essentially been a jock my entire life, right? I played baseball. School was always secondary. School was just a way to allow me to play more baseball and get my schooling paid for. So when I graduated and the dream ends, you're just kind of stuck there and you don't know what to do. It's you've been defined by this thing for a very long time, and now it's time to redefine yourself. And I knew that what I was really looking for was competition. I think that's what first attracted me to sales was, it's a competition. It's marketing. You're marketing yourself against others. But I just didn't enjoy it. I wasn't doing good, right? I was making good money. I was doing well in that aspect, but I wasn't helping anybody necessarily. And I'd always toyed around with the idea of going to law school. I wanted to be a sports agent. I said, well, how can I stay around the game?
Me too.
And how can I help these guys that I know didn't spend the time that they should have in classes understanding, the contracts and things like that they're about to sign and go through. And so, how can I help those people that I can relate to so easily? So I decided to go to law school. Ended up at Loyola in LA.
Good school.
Met with an agent, saw the kind of lifestyle that he was living. He offered to let me work for him. He's a really good guy. He's probably the only guy in the industry that I would work for, because I think the industry is made up of a certain type of person, somebody that I didn't want to associate with. I wanted a family and I wanted those things, and so I met with this gentleman, and he could not have been a more class act. But I saw the lifestyle that he was living. He'd had a kid, 3 weeks before, and he wasn't going to be home for the next 6 months necessarily because of spring training and we actually met up at Santa Barbara at a scout game because he was looking at some potential clients. And so I knew that being with my family and fostering a family is more important than staying around the game. So at that point, I made a decision that I was going to be defined by something other than baseball. And so I switched my focus in school a little bit. And I wanted to find a way to help people. And I think that, at that time is when I started working for you. Didn't have any idea what you did. Not a clue about what kind of practice you had or anything like that. Not one clue. All I knew was that I had nothing legal on my resume, and I needed to do something if I ever wanted to get a job.
I don't think I had an idea either by that point. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
So I went to work for you, found out you did personal injury, family law, and bankruptcy, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, these are none of the things that I want to do in my life. I didn't really know what personal injury was or anything like that. I think the only idea that I had of it was that they got a bad rap, right? They were seen as these ambulance chasers.
Stigmas.
And so, I thought to myself, is this what I want to do?
Wasn't the first case that, I'm glad we're talking about it. It's bringing back a lot of memories. Wasn't one of the first personal injury cases that you helped me out with was the Esteban Flores case? Yeah,
it was a potential medical battery case.
Right.
And I think that...
what happened in that case?
That was pivotal in my career, to be honest with you, because this was a case where there was a stent left inside of Mr. Flores, and the issue was, the reason that it was a potential medical battery was that they never provided any sort of they never obtained any sort of consent from him.
Right.
And so they arguably did something that he had no idea was going on.
No, he didn't know it was inside of him for years.
And I didn't, and I say that it was pivotal in my career because I didn't even know that this was considered personal injury. I had no idea, right?
Okay.
In my mind at that time, personal injury was rear-end car accidents on the freeway, and that was it. And so I didn't understand really what I was getting myself into. And I think it was at that time that I realized that here's this guy who He's a landscaper, right?
That's
Lives
right.
a very modest life.
Uh-huh.
It's obvious that he's an immigrant, and who is here to stand up for him? Because he can't protect himself in this aspect. He's not sophisticated enough to stand up in a court of law. And so who is here to protect him? And I think more than anything, I saw that this person was really injured, right? Psychologically, he was going through physical pain. And so this wasn't your rear-end car accident. This was a good person who had been wronged. And
Yeah.
you know, right away it resonated with me because I think about, you know, what my parents always said, and that, you know, do good. And this was my opportunity to do good.
Interesting.
And so I think it was at that time that I understood that it was everything I was looking for. It was the competition, it was doing good. Financially, you know, it had big potential. I think it checked all the boxes, but most of all, it was something that I could really get behind. It was something I could be passionate about. And so I think it made the decision very easy at that point that this is what I wanted to do.
So, you know, a lot of personal injury lawyers, like going off of what you're saying, there is a negative stigma attached to it for sure. On the other hand, there's a lot of allure to it. And I think the reason for that is because there's a lot of money to be made in it, right? And it's sexy, has that draw, has that appeal. Family law doesn't, and
I guess I can tell that story too.
If I'm being honest, you know, we just recorded a podcast regarding family law. We did another one on personal injury, but you know, if I'm being honest, when I think about how we continue to move forward in our marketability and our efforts to market ourselves, you know, I feel like it should be, in a way, predominantly driven by our personal injury experience. But lately, I've been seeing that you, Josh, particularly, have a real knack for family law, and you're good in what you do. I'm proud to say that, but for some reason, family law, you've really excelled with it. And if I'm being honest too, you've kind of, you know, learned a lot and can do it better actually than I can in some respects. I'll be the first to admit that. I'm very impressed in how well you've taken to family law. But let's shift our focus to family law. And you know, is there a case? Is there a client? What is it about family law that you clearly have been doing so well with?
So, look, when I first started working for you, I wanted nothing to do with family law. I thought it was a soap opera.
I understand.
I wanted nothing to do with it.
I understand.
And then I started to understand it on a different level. I think coming from what I come from with two educators is, you know, I understand the importance of the impact these cases have on kids' lives.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, you know, two persons' decisions to have a child, right, should impact the lifestyle that child is going to live, right? Just because the parents made the decision to get married and then either get divorced or not be married and conceive, it shouldn't impact the child's life to the extent possible. And so I have a real soft spot for kids. And I don't want to see them be put in the middle of that. Now, I come from a loving household and I've never experienced that necessarily on a first-hand basis.
Sure.
But I think what really drew me to it though was that it was a different currency.
What do you mean?
It was a different currency to negotiate with, and negotiation is really what I enjoy. If I could, you know, just negotiate, I think at some point I would probably just negotiate. And personal injury is so dollars and cents, especially dealing with these insurance companies, are really nothing more than bean counters. So, but family law gave me the opportunity to negotiate with a different currency. And I don't want that to be confused with me using the children as currency. That's not what I'm talking about, but I'm talking about emotions. There's a ton of emotion in family law, and that's why they hire us. They hire us to take the emotions out of it. and deal with the assets and the custody and things like that. But it was a different flavor.
Uh-huh.
And I think that it actually ties back into personal injury, because it's also not a secret that I don't necessarily enjoy the workup on a personal injury case. And I think that my forte comes after that. I think it comes as we're approaching trial, because as we start to develop themes and things like that, I think that I'm negotiating with that same currency again, because when you start to talk about the pain and suffering aspect of the case, I'm essentially negotiating with the jury with those same emotions. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there is a relationship there, and I think that that's really where I thrive.
Sure.
I think Denise, our office manager, yesterday at lunch, was very candid in that I do a decent job at manipulating people with their feelings.
Okay.
And so I think that whether that's a good thing or whether it's a bad thing, I think is really it's just the way you look at it. But
through what prism you're looking through.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that is why I have an affinity for the family law, because it's so feeling based, and that's my favorite part about the personal injury aspect of it too. I think that we talked about it a little bit before, but if you're measuring the value of your personal injury case by what the medical bills are, I think you're doing your client a huge disservice when you start to look at it from what are this person's injuries, right? Both physical, but emotional and psychological. I think that's when you really start to understand the harm that this person has suffered.
Yeah.
And so again, it ties back to those emotions and how we can deal in the emotions of the law, which kind of sounds like an oxymoron.
Yeah, it kind of does, but I get it.
But that's how I really think about it. And I was blessed to have great parents, and I think that one thing that my dad stressed to me a lot as a child, which is sort of ridiculous to think about now, but he was so big on communication and what he calls communication rapport, and being able to communicate and read other people.
Yeah.
And I think that if you preach that at I think the first time we talked about communication rapport, I was probably 6 or something like that.
No way.
It's just something that comes very natural, and that I enjoy because I know it. I'm comfortable with it.
Comfortable with communicating?
With communicating, and I think it's one of the, it's the most important thing that you can do in life, whether it's in the law or whether it's in your personal life.
Absolutely.
My wife and I have a great relationship because we're good communicators.
Right. No, I agree. Communication is so vital to any relationship, whether it's a personal one or a business one, or in this case, or in cases of a jury trial, communicating with the jury, conveying emotions, conveying themes,
and so I think
fighting for our clients.
And so I think the theme across the board, whether it's family law or whether it's personal injury, is taking those emotions, understanding how to capture them, and understanding how to deploy them in story form if it's personal injury, and in a negotiation perspective if it's family law. And so it's really just about harnessing the communication and the emotions and using them to benefit and advocate for your client.
Are you saying, Josh, that you love to bend people's wills by the use of your words? Is that what you're saying?
I think that's what I was trained to do. I don't think my parents intended to train me to do that, but I think that we were. I don't think I've probably thrown one punch in my entire life, right? That's not how we were raised. I don't think I've never heard any stories. Actually, I take that back. I've heard one story about my dad throwing one punch in his life.
Really?
In high school, because he got low bridged while he was playing basketball and broke his nose, and he stood up and punched the guy in the face and broke his nose too.
Oh, I'd love to hear that story.
But we're not a violent family. That's we're peaceful creatures, I guess.
That's
and
cool.
So I had to learn, especially being undersized, right? You're undersized, and so people think you can take it. They can take advantage of you.
Like insurance companies, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. And so I had to learn to stand up for myself with my words.
Awesome. Well, we're running out of time, but I would love to have Dr. Michael G. on our show.
It's actually Stephen Michael.
Stephen Michael. Is that right?
His first name is Stephen Michael.
With a V.
With a V.
All right. Well, everybody, we're out of time, but thanks for watching and listening. You have been on The Good Fight with Attorney Steve and Josh. Have a great day.